Welcome back to the Cured Collective YouTube series, Cured Collective podcast. This one won't be a podcast. This will just be a YouTube. But welcome back, everybody. We appreciate you. I just said on my Instagram story that Lauren and I said we're just starting to flex our muscles. And then I said, well, maybe we're just warming our muscles up because it's taking us a little bit to get in the stride that we really want to be in to fully convey the messages that we want to share. Mm-hmm. And so thanks for tuning in.
There's
thanks
a
for being
learning
here.
curve with anything new. And this YouTube channel is new for us. And sitting down with you all in this format is new for us. And so we're figuring it out, and each week we're trying to get a little bit better so that we're bringing you the best of the best.
Yeah. Part of what I said in my Instagram video will help. What I said in my Instagram video will help tee up this conversation. But as you do tune into the show, as you do hear the conversations that we are engaging in and topics that we are bringing up or research studies that we are sharing or news articles and announcements that come out that spark interest or spark conversations for you, if it starts a conversation with a loved one, a friend, anything, please share it. It's super helpful for us, and it also helps tee up those conversations for you. Sometimes I noticed in my leadership, and I share this with Lauren, and it probably happens for you with a lot of your books and your coaching practice in the past, but it helps to hear or learn something via a book, a podcast, a YouTube video, share that with the person that you want to have a conversation with, and then dive into a conversation. It helps tee it up because you say, hey, like referencing pieces of a conversation. So that is what it is. But if you tune in and you feel like it's something that you want to share with somebody else, please do. And thank you all for being here. What I said in my Instagram video is what we're trying to do on this channel is become, as Andy Frisella says, unfuckwithable. We're in a world right now where we have to start to develop a new idea of resilience and also what I believe emotional intelligence. So we wanted to dive into a specific topic here today. I mentioned something to you last night, Lauren, and you said, oh yeah, let's do it. So what are we going to talk about today?
We're talking about temperature and state change, and it goes beautifully with this idea of building resilience via the hormetic effect and also increasing our emotional intelligence, our emotional threshold, our ability to sit with different things. So I'm extremely excited to dive in.
A note that I wrote down to tee up our conversation was, we both mentioned emotional intelligence and the idea of emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, and not necessarily emotional resiliency, because I think that it's important for us to feel our emotions, but we have to understand them. We have to be aware of them, and we also have to understand that I mentioned this on Instagram the other day as well, is like I used to have days where I would wake up and want to burn the world down, but a better way for me to approach the day is understand how I'm feeling and go into some type of a state change and then sharpen my tool set and go into the day without wreaking the havoc that I might have wreaking the havoc that I might have wrecked. In a way that where can be much more effective and just aware of how I woke up today. So
sure. And I think that it's the concept of resilience is so relevant with emotions. Everything that you're saying is this concept of resilience, right? When we think about trees, for example, we think about just the standard tree. If there's too much weight on a branch, the branch breaks. There's no resilience. If we think about a willow and we think about the weight that sits on top of a willow branch, the branch will slope towards the ground, drop off the weight, and then return to its normal position. It's this idea of finding balance, finding like homeostasis. And with our emotions, we all have days where we wake up and we are not our best selves, or we're angry, or we're frustrated, we're stressed. And part of resilience is acknowledging that we're in that place, feeling it, and then having the ability to kind of ride that wave, go through that slope, and then return back to our normal baseline.
Hmm. I
And
like that.
temperature helps with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that.
physiologically, and I think also what you and I will both speak to is giving ourselves an opportunity to do something challenging, to sit with something difficult, and then come through to the other side and actually feel invigorated.
Yeah. Yeah, there at some point in our lives, and it's our generation, and oh, I think it's the generation after us. Are we in the same? I'm a millennial. Are we
Yeah,
considered the
we're in the
same
same
generation?
generation.
When
Yeah.
does millennial at
95 stops, and
okay.
that's when Gen Z starts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point along the way, this concept of safetyism and protectionism and um, you don't have to go through difficult situations and understand what it truly takes to
Participation
win.
awards.
Somehow that came up. Um, and what we want to be able, like, we're in a world right now where is that helpful at all? Like, I personally don't think so. And I know that we've had conversations around it a lot, but as you just mentioned, the ability to go into a difficult situation, the ability to expose yourself, the choice to expose yourself, and then the ability to make it to the other side and then recognize how powerful and how truly resilient we can actually be is extremely important. Something that I wrote down here is um, with you are not in as much of a threat or truly as unsafe as you think you are.
Mm.
And you can recognize that when you put yourself in one of these situations. So let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about temperature because we've both been playing around with temperature a bunch over the last several months. And if you follow anybody like Wim Hof or you follow Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Huberman, he's been talking about it a lot. But the whole thing with Wim Hof is like he's developing resiliency, and that's a lot through
Absolutely.
cold exposure. But
Mm-hmm.
speak to what you've been practicing, what you've been absorbing from the entities. I don't know. I'm trying the sources that we love to
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
listen to.
so I've been building up my cold exposures. I've been doing them in the shower, and I'll typically have my usual warm shower, and then for the last little chunk of time, I'll turn the faucet to the coldest setting and I stand there and breathe.
Hmm.
I was only doing a minute, but this week I moved up to 2 minutes. So I'm trying to do 2 minutes every single day. And it's incredible. I mean, just from an anecdotal standpoint, I absolutely hate them. I don't enjoy them. They're not fun at all.
Yeah.
But I really love the feeling that I get afterwards. It feels like I just drank 5 cups of coffee. My mind is clear, and I can actually feel the norepinephrine in my body. I'm almost buzzing after a cold shower, and that's then when I typically start my workday.
Mm.
And so like to I love to start my day in that way. I find that my brain operates on a much better level, and I think that as far as my emotions are concerned, I'm way more regulated.
Mm.
And as far as what I've been absorbing from different sources that we love, and just from research that I found, there's actually been some new research studies being performed on the effects of cold showers, cold exposures, hydrotherapy for treating anxiety and depression. So there is a very real physiological component of why we feel better after cold exposure, why our emotions are more regulated, why our minds are clearer. And like I said, part of it is the norepinephrine because our sympathetic nervous system is activated. What I found really interesting was that it also has to do with the amount of cold receptors that we have and giving our brain this like flush of cool. So we have 3 to 10 times more cold receptors than warm receptors.
Hmm.
And so when we are exposed to cold, all of the blood from our periphery, from our peripheral nerves and ends and appendages, it gets sent to our core and it gets sent to our brain. And the fresh blood pretty much just flushes the brain out. And that is what is thought to create this therapeutic effect, this antidepressive effect. And it also decreases brain inflammation, which many individuals might know inflammation, chronic inflammation, is associated with depression. So that's where the antidepressive effect comes in.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned this. I'm continuing to reference Instagram stories. I don't know if I ever posted this one the other day, but Lauren is the photographic memory statistic retaining savant. Like that's who she is, and I will always reference to her on stats and the depths and understandings of these studies. And I'll talk down on myself for a little bit right now. Is like I read and absorb and create understanding through listening to Andrew Huberman and reading books and listening to podcasts and hearing you speak. But when I try to regurgitate the facts, it's really hard for me. So when we will be in this dynamic and Lauren will share something and then I'll try to like take it and say, this is like how I'm trying to like dumb it down in my head and then regurgitate it to you. But with extreme temperatures and especially cold, we'll talk about hot too, but when you are in that state, when you are in the freezing cold shower, you are in the ice bath, you are in the sauna, with those extreme temperatures, you truly can't focus on anything besides your breath. So, how big is the problem of you spilt the coffee on the ground now? Or how big is the problem of the misunderstanding and miscommunication that you had with your loved one? Or how big is the problem? How big are these problems out there in this world that you've made up to be so big when you're in this situation where you're like, okay, all I can focus on is my breath right now. I sit in the sauna and I'll try to read sometimes. I try and sit in the sauna for 20 to 25 minutes. I can read for about the first 5 to 10 minutes. And after that, I just literally can't focus on anything besides getting through that exposure. So I'm trying to dumb down, I'm trying to share my interpretation of what's going on there. I'm like, oh, well, I can't think about anything else when I'm in that exposure. And it's like, is this like exposure therapy? Is that what that is? So I just wanted to share that that's what my thoughts were, and then share how we go back and forth as a couple.
I mean, what do you feel when you have your cold showers? I mean, you've been doing them a lot longer than I have, and I've never done an actual cold plunge.
Mm-hmm.
You have done a legitimate cold plunge. What do you experience mentally? You kind of touched on it, everything empties, but also physically, as far as the adrenaline rush goes, and the talk us through what you feel during and then compare it to what you feel after, or
Mm-hmm.
even a before and after picture.
Well, I think that this is so perfect for what we were, like already saying is like before I'm nervous,
Mm.
not as much with heat as I am with cold. But before I'm nervous, I'm like, okay, this is going to be difficult during when you first get in the plunge, cold plunge. I've done it in freezing rivers in December in Colorado. Um, right when you go in, there's a shock. Like there's always a shock, regardless of how many times you've done it, regardless of how many cold showers you've taken. There is a shock, and there's this idea. So you set it up beforehand, and you're like, oh, like I'm a little bit nervous. Like what's this going to feel like? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to make it through? Like, that's what's going on. You get in, you feel the shock. You're like, oh, fuck, I'm not okay. And then you breathe. And then you recognize that you are okay and that you are a lot more powerful than you thought yourself to be and that you can make it through and that it is very comfortable, but you aren't going to die. And to get there is it's a muscle I think everybody has to train, because I think that what happens for a lot of people is they have the first exposure and they don't think that they can make it through, and they haven't trained other areas of their life where it might be breath or whatever else it might be, but you haven't actually like put yourself in difficult situations. So the little bit of exposure and you want to just give up, run away and be done with it. And so the before to the first instant of exposure to the continuation of exposure to then getting out is like, I just look at it as like, have you seen those memes of like, I think Ed Milet has posted them, but it's a person looking in the mirror and it's a little kid looking in the mirror, and there's the little kid, and then in the mirror there's this superhero, and there's this superhero that has the cape. And I think that if I could paint the picture, it's like the man looking in the mirror, seeing a little kid and being scared, and then going in and then coming out and then looking in the mirror and seeing the superhero.
It's such a good visualization. And everything that you're describing is exactly what a lot of researchers are theorizing drives the extension of benefits from just the physiological to the psychological. So it's this concept of brain over body, right? And when
I
you're
love that. Andrew Huberman says that, right? Yeah.
I don't know if Dr. Huberman says it. I haven't heard it from him, but it's the same thing that's associated with Wim Hof. It's everything Wim Hof does. And it's interesting that you brought up breath, because the researchers specifically look at the mechanisms of rhythmic breathing and breath holds and temperature, because they create this physiological survival instinct inside of us. So if we're holding our breath, our body starts to fight for another breath. If we are exposing ourselves to extreme cold, our body's survival instinct is to try to get out of the cold, to warm back up so that we're able to return to homeostasis. But if we can sit in that state, if we can be in that space, then we're training our minds to withstand. And that creates, like you're saying, psychological effects that extend far beyond just the cold plunge or just the cold shower. You start to realize that perhaps these survival behaviors that you're in other areas of life, you don't necessarily need. And you start to build up this self-belief, this self-efficacy. And I mean, I've noticed that it definitely ripples out into other areas of my life and how I think of myself.
Yeah. So what Dr. Andrew Huberman says is, he says using the body to change the brain versus using the brain to change the body. Like the idea of like seeing something on the media, having a thought, feeling an emotion, being extremely afraid or in fear. So it's the brain, and then the body shrinks and contracts, and then you make a decision to go drink alcohol or do something like that versus, okay, well, there's something that created this emotion. I'm aware that I'm feeling this way. And what if I don't use my thinking brain to get out of this? What if I literally just said, okay, I'm aware that this is going on. Somebody that knows you really well, like your significant other, your wife, could say, go get in the cold plunge or go take a cold shower or go sit in the sauna and then come back and talk to me. And so it's like you have to create awareness. Like it's important to you literally can't do this unless you're aware, or you just have this like badass solid routine where you do the same thing every single day, which is really what we want to cultivate with everybody and cultivate in ourselves. Is regardless of what's going on, I do the same thing every single day, and it helps me become resilient. But you also have to know that there are going to be times outside of your routine where you're going to be in a certain situation where your emotions are high,
Mm-hmm.
and you have choice. And what you should do is you should use your body to change your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that idea, because I think that you and I, and maybe you out there listening to this show, we are the people that like to intellectualize everything. And for individuals that myself, who ruminates a lot, who has historically been anxious, that's led to depression, that's caused a lot of issues in my life, for me to start to look at, okay, well, this is who I am, and I know it, and I'm aware of it. So when I can find myself in those situations through other practices that we will talk about, including meditation, I can be aware,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can actually choose to go a different way. And if we continue to take that one path versus the other path, like, are we going to go down the one still at times? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's just creating that pattern interrupt, creating that state change, and knowing that there actually is another option. Whereas I think we forgot at times that there is another option.
For sure. And I just want to reiterate everything that you're saying because it's so important. What I hear you describing is this common phrase, this common belief that we can't think ourselves into new ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
We have to perform actions in order to reach this place, right? Awareness is so important, but it doesn't end there. The accountability and action that come from awareness are so important, if not more important.
Mm.
And instead of trying to think ourselves into this new version of ourselves, I mean, I've been there. I've tried reading a book and thinking myself into, oh well, I'm aware of this and I'm aware of that, and I can just think myself into more self-compassion or more self-love or any area of life. Well, I can't use my mind to get all of me, all of my existence and my body to this place. I have to think about, okay, if I envision this next version of myself, if I envision this higher me, how would she act? And then I have to perform the actions that she would do, and me habitually performing those actions in a routine that I've intentionally set up is inevitably going to get my mind there too.
Yeah. 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 So this is this is a continuation of a conversation that we will continue to have about what the hell do we do in this world that we're living in, and what is it that's truly in our control, and how can we become unfuckwithable. Um, Times are going to always be up and down and tough and amazing, and we can't really control what's going on in the world, but we can control how we can control how we show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I I think that temperature is something that we are still just scratching the surface of. Dr. Andrew Huberman had a recent podcast about using temperature to cool your palms and your
Mm-hmm.
face and your feet, and the way that it's increasing performance in athletes a stupid amount. I would say something, but I don't know the actual number.
I mean, what's so interesting is we're scratching the surface with modern research, but hydrotherapy goes back all the way to Hippocrates.
Right.
And Hippocrates was known to say that it allays lassitude, meaning that it ends mental and physical weakness.
Mm,
All the way back to
that's really good.
Hippocrates. So, hydrotherapy, cold exposures, heat exposures, none of it is new. It's just we're only beginning to scratch the surface of modern day research and application.
Mm.
And I'm pretty stoked about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So temperature, if you've listened to our podcast, um, I I've failed at titling it correctly. It says 9 habits to feel your best, but it should say nine 9 ways to be unfuckwithable or something like that. That's
Yeah,
temperature is one of them.
for sure.
Temperature is one of the pillars of what it means to truly live an elevated existence, and you need to utilize it for yourself. You can use it in so many different ways, but when you feel yourself in an emotionally charged state, this might be one of the best times to use it. So
Hmm.
check out more from Dr. Andrew Huberman. I think you have a couple other resources in front of you
Yeah, I'll
that you
link
can point people
to,
to.
yep, I'll link to the different research articles that I nerded out with. And if you are anything like me, then you can sit down with your afternoon euphoria and improve your focus while you learn all about temperature and state change.
Yeah. One thing that I will tee off here before we end is in one of Dr. Andrew Huberman's podcasts, he talks about sauna. And I didn't mention this, but there's a study where you do 20 minutes hot exposure, you take 30 minutes out, and then you go 20 minutes back in. And this was in a post workout phase. The human growth hormone or HGH levels, HGH increase was like 500, 600%, something stupid like that. And to actually get those increases in hormones and uh, other transmitters and other, I'll just say, bodily functions at that rate through taking exogenous compounds, it's not even like comparable, which is
Mm-mm.
insane. So
Mm-mm.
check out Dr. Andrew Huberman. Check out the other links that Lauren puts in the show notes, and develop your emotional awareness and remember that there's an opportunity to make it through by exposing yourself to something difficult, an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. I mean, start to play around with it. Play with your own resilience. And you will wake up most mornings not wanting to expose yourself to the cold. And like you're saying, just remember how it feels on the other side and
Yep.
do it anyways.
Yep. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode.